Okay, let's get started. Welcome. So glad to have all of you joining this webinar. I'm talking to university leaders who are defending American higher education. My name is Eric Malin. I'm here at Duke University at our Sanford School of Public Policy and the Keenan Institute for Ethics. And I direct our program on democracy and the politics of American higher education. This is a project about 4 years old that has looked at the threats to liberal democracy and American higher education coming from a variety of places. The project has consisted of webinars, conferences, an occasional newsletter, and today is our most well-attended webinar. So clearly, on the eve of Donald Trump's inauguration to return to the American presidency, perhaps unlike any other time in American history, higher education is under attack. In a recent webinar we did with the historian Ellen Schrecker, who compared this moment to McCarthyism, she thought the moment was much more fraught in that going after the entire sector rather than individual professors. The incoming Vice President, J.D. Vance, gave a speech in 2021 entitled "Universities Are the Enemy," and ended that speech quoting Richard Nixon, who said that professors are the enemy. Linda McMahon, who's been nominated to be the Secretary of Education, is the chair of the board of the America First Policy Institute, a think tank that opposes the teaching of critical race theory and all DEI programs, to name just two higher ed programs. So this webinar will discuss how colleges and universities should respond to these intensifying threats to American higher education. University presidents face difficult choices as they seek to remain nonpartisan in the face of increasing political interference across issues like accreditation, what we teach, syllabi, federal funding, and the like. One of the most exciting things about the group of university presidents that we have here today is the diversity of institutions that they represent. And so let me briefly introduce each of them and then turn to the substance of our conversation today. And I'm just thrilled that we have nearly 200 people joining us right now. Pat McGuire has been part of this project before. She's been president of Trinity since 1989. Are you like the longest serving university president, Pat?
Well, not quite, but they won't let me out until I get it straight. So,
okay. Well, she was the assistant dean for development and external affairs at Georgetown Law Center, where she was also a professor of law. She's won many awards. The TIAA Institute honored her with the Hesburgh Award, Father Hesburgh, a model of university leaders taking moral stances. So that's quite an honor. She won the Carnegie Award for Academic Leadership from the Carnegie Corporation, and many others. She's honorary degrees from many colleges and universities, appears frequently in the Chronicle of Higher Education and other places, thinking in a very nuanced, clear way about the role of university leaders at this moment. Michael Gavin became the 5th president of Delta College in Michigan in 2021. He joined that community college with more than 20 years of experience at large community colleges and received national recognition for his leadership across a variety of areas. I can't recommend enough learning more about Michael's organizing work that he's doing in defending diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also his most recent book, The New White Nationalism in Politics and Higher Education. Really an important statement about what's happening in higher ed right now. And finally, Michael Roth, who's also been involved with our project, very grateful for his participation, became the 16th president of Wesleyan University in 2007. He's overseen the launch of academic programs at Wesleyan, such as the Alberton Center for the Study of Public Life, the Shapiro Center for Writing. Michael has been a prolific writer, both books and articles and speeches on these very important issues. His most recent book is The Student, A Short History, which came out just a year ago. Again, all three of these colleagues have been some of the most important defenders of American higher education. with that introduction, we're going to go for about 30 minutes. We'll have a conversation. Participants that are now over 200 can put questions in the Q&A. And I will, Jack and I, who works with me on this project, will curate those and pose those to our panelists. So the first thing I want to do is ask, and I'll start with Pat. Pat, what is it that, was it a hard decision for you over the years to be a very outspoken critic of particularly the right-wing threats to American higher education? That's a question that I will ask of each of the panelists as a way of starting. Pat, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Well, thanks, Eric. I love being with you. I love being with both Michaels, and this is such an important conversation. I don't find it hard at all, and I don't know why my brother and sister presidents find it so hard, because our very business, the very core of what we do as colleges and universities, is at stake. We're seeing the rise of what I call the ideology of ignorance. There is an attack going on knowledge and expertise. We see this most immediately in the nomination of cabinet secretaries who have no expertise, no experience in any of the areas that they're supposedly responsible for. You know, the Secretary of Education runs a wrestling federation. The Secretary of Defense is a television commentator with a sketchy past. You know, the supposed Secretary of Health and Human Services has no professional healthcare experience. I'm told that he's dabbled in drugs, but that's a whole different issue. But he wants to eliminate vaccines. He doesn't want to eliminate disease. He wants to eliminate vaccines. This is a scandal, not only for our nation, but it's a scandal for higher education. How did we fall so far that it's possible for an entire administration to come in to have people who are so thoroughly uneducated, lacking in knowledge about the areas? So I see this as a major assault, not just on universities as institutions. I see it as a major assault on our business. Our business is knowledge, and we convey knowledge to students in order to build their expertise so they can become the citizen leaders of the future. And I look at the situation right now and I say, how can I encourage my students to be as expert as possible, whether in healthcare or global affairs or education, if you can actually rise to high office with no educational background, with no real knowledge in the subject matter? So first of all, our whole reason for being as an enterprise is at risk. Now, we also know, which is where presidents should all be on the barricades, we are all students of history, and we all know that authoritarians use ignorance as a weapon of to seize and retain power. It is the oldest tyrannical weapon in the book. And we also know that education liberates people from the fear that authoritarianism brings. We should be all over this as college presidents, that the rise of this, what I've been calling the ideology of ignorance, is really a tool of control in American life. And of course, it started with the first time we really heard this was when in his first campaign in 2015, then candidate Trump said he loves the poorly educated. And he's built his entire campaign on pandering to individuals and to voters who may be less well informed or who really bought into the fictions that were conveyed to them through the campaigns. This is not just a political issue, though. You know, people will say, well, that sounds very political. No. A democracy to thrive, to be a healthy, thriving democracy, we need well-educated, well-informed citizens making rational choices based on critical reasoning, research, and the best that we can educate citizens in higher education. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And instead, we have been left behind as a new generation of civic leaders seems to have arisen, who not only have no knowledge and no expertise, but don't really care, and in fact, want to set higher education aside. My final point is, and I've said it for years, higher education should be the counterweight to government in a free society. Higher education should be the place, through the work of our faculties, through the voices of presidents who hold government. And when we have the legs kicked out from under us, as we have, we cannot exercise our responsibility to hold government accountable as a freestanding enterprise. So that's why I speak out.
Thank you, Pat, very much. Michael Gavin, that same general question to you, please.
Yeah, I would agree with almost everything, well, everything that Pat says as usual. I would also underscore, though, that there's been an interesting shift in the paradigm where many people in both in higher education and outside of it somehow take as truth that debating about people's identities, whether they're black or brown, is a legitimate debate, and the idea that somehow it is a political discussion to safeguard our curriculum and whether or not books should be banned. Those are not political arguments. Those are anti-educational arguments.
Mhm.
And it really is important to put the discourse in those frames. I see nothing political at all about safeguarding our enterprise of education in order to ensure that everybody has access to knowledge and a better life through education. I also don't see the notion that, as Pat had alluded to, I do see, I should say, the link between liberation and education that has been well documented by significant leaders in our history and somehow are being ignored at the same time. So the very vision and the core principles of America, whether it be just the concept of a library offering free access to knowledge, higher education doing something similar, at least in terms of its most idealistic point of view, is part and parcel of democracy. They're not delinked, they're linked. And as we see, I'll put a pin in the last part. The current moment in time, which is I use the word moment to be pretty broad in nature, really. You could say it's either the last 4 to 5 decades and or just since the last administration came, meaning the Trump administration, we see two things that are very important. A shift in the way that higher education has been attacked. We had been attacked before by similar kind of entities, but what was provided in the last administration was a playbook at the federalized level that then states could follow through executive orders offered through the Trump administration that are most definitely going to come again. States were able to follow that playbook, and how higher ed reacts individually in terms of presidents at their individual institutions also has an impact on the sector itself. So thinking through that as national leaders is really important. The second part is the way in which things have shifted in the last 8 to 10 years with regard to DEI on campuses are the following. We've seen 176% of more black and brown bodies on campuses since 1980. We've seen in reciprocal fashion the same amount of orders that are coming either through the federal or state level legislation at different states, not all the states, in an attempt to marginalize people who have already been marginalized, black and brown bodies specifically. So I see this as a very much racialized approach to who gets access to the knowledge of the sort that Pat was just talking about. And on top of it, and lastly, the last way in which there's a difference between what we've seen before and after are really actually not just rhetorical and political approaches to marginalization, but violent ones. What we saw with 2017 with white nationalists on the campus chanting anti-Semitic views at UVA, to bomb threats at HBCUs and community colleges throughout the country, to I won't mention the gentleman's name, but a man who shot 12 people at a church in Charleston who wanted to go to a university campus before that, but there was too much security. There's a very similar link among those very extreme examples and the attacks that are politicized and focused on identity that I see as very problematic for the nation.
Yeah, Michael, that's well stated. You say in your book to ignore the power of white nationalism and its infiltration into political, educational, legal, and other spheres is to accept further threats to the nation. Complacency is a choice. It is a choice that threatens the very nation itself. And I think that's a powerful statement. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. Michael Roth, you're next.
Well, I want to disagree because that's my nature. So, but it's hard because what Pat and Michael have said, it seems to me spot on. So let me just take a different approach. I mean, I've been speaking out against the Trumpian policies since summer of 2016, when they are antithetical to the mission of higher education, which they have pretty consistently been, because I think I'm defending the mission of my university, which is very much aligned with the missions of many colleges and universities around the country. And I think it's a dereliction of duty, to use that old-fashioned phrase, not to defend the mission of the institution that you've been asked to lead, especially when governmental powers are being used to undermine your capacity to do the things you say you believe in. And I think that there are many of our colleagues who are hoping for the best for their institutions by trying to stay out of trouble with government authorities. And I get the impulse, I guess, but I think it's a mistake not to defend the mission of their institution, and insofar as belonging and fairness and diversity are part of your mission, and it's part of the mission of almost every college and university in this country right now, to not defend that in the face of this kind of extraordinarily successful campaign against DEI, I think, again, it's a dereliction of duty. There are people taking the playbook out of my Jewish tradition who say, well, just change our name, you know, we won't be Goldberg, we'll just be Gould or Gold, and I mean, that will work. That's not going to work. That's and it's also, we should defend. It's perfectly reasonable to defend fairness, belonging, access, the things we've been talking about for the last decades. However, my discordant note that I have want to sound is that it's also on us that, I mean, we lost this election. It was very clear what Trump and Vance said. So we've been pointing out, it's been clear to people, and more people who we thought would be aligned with the positions we've articulated are not aligned with those positions. And there are good reasons. There are voting inhibitions and violence. I mean, lots of things, but a lot of people just didn't vote at all, right? And why is that? Why has it been so easy to get so many people to hate higher education? Now, in America, there's a long tradition of anti-intellectualism. I know. But that's not an excuse. Our job, especially those of us who try to align higher education with democracy and not just with meritocracy or elitism, if we believe that higher education should be aligned with democracy, as I think we do, we should be asking ourselves, why have we failed to educate people in such a way that their expertise doesn't feel like condescension to others? Why do so many people think that higher education has been a vehicle for cementing privilege in this country rather than for promoting access? And the reason so many people think that is because it's true in many sectors. And so I think it's on us not just to articulate what the so-and-so is doing wrong in Trump world, but to say, what can we do in higher education to better make a case for how our form of teaching and learning actually is conducive to a democratic society, a democratic culture. And we've clearly failed to make that case successfully. We preach to the choir all the time. And I think what we have to learn to do a better job at is welcoming more points of view onto our campuses. It's going to be even harder now, because my colleagues will say to me, you want us to bring conservatives to campus when they're banning books? And I'll say, yeah, we actually should bring them to campus because we want to talk. Why are you banning? We have to talk to them. We can't just make fun of them or say call them names like they call us names. But that's going to be increasingly challenging in an atmosphere of either of intimidation for sure, and state violence as a threat.
Michael, you teed up a really good next topic for our conversation, which is the part that you alluded to, which is what have we done to bring this on, and how do we self-reflect? And I just want to turn that to Michael Gavin and maybe start with Pat and then to Michael Gavin. How do you think about that? Pat, you wrote a little bit in the Chronicle of some response, like the Stanford law school incident, right, where they stopped a conservative judge from speaking, and you criticized that. Can you say a little more about the part of this we own as liberal academics?
Well, so we own part of it, but I'm going to start by saying it's not all of higher education. And one of the problems is we have lost the narrative in the media because there are maybe 10 or 20 institutions that are the focus of all of this anger and ire. And they're very elite, they're very wealthy, you know, the Harvards, the Stanfords, the Penns, and so forth. And I'm thinking of the graduation ceremonies. We just had 2 winter graduation ceremonies at Trinity, and we're a predominantly Black Hispanic serving institution, and my students are thrilled to be here, to earn degrees, to have the pathway to success that higher education offered me when I came from a modestly endowed family back in the 70s and so forth. And that is, most of higher education today is still the gateway to opportunity. But what grabs headlines are a few institutions that cost too much and that have big endowments and that are great, big, fat, juicy targets. You didn't see the 3 of us invited to testify before Congress. You saw the presidents of very elite schools, and they blew it, and they did a terrible job, but it didn't represent us. It also, by the way, is a false narrative that higher education is all about ephemera, you know, liberal principles, indoctrination. I'm busy indoctrinating future nurses about how to take care of all the rest of us in our old age. I'm busy teaching teachers and nonprofit leaders. Most of higher ed is not about what we are accused of in the press. So this gets to the issue of what we brought on ourselves. We have done a terrible job representing our industry to the world. And we have played into those who want to pretend that all of higher education is about big money and status. Now, there are reasons why some institutions play into it. I know a whole lot of mid-level institutions who the first thing they do in September is run to U.S. News and World Report and wonder how they can move up in the rankings. We care too much about rankings. We care too much about interinstitutional competitiveness. It comes out of, I believe, the overwhelming influence of the athletics culture in the behavior of institutions. So we want to get to the Final Four. We want to be in the bowl championship. Now we want to be, you know, in the first rank of U.S. News. Now we want to do everything possible to strip away the service we do to our students because we want to meet the other metrics. This is where DEI comes in, because if you're an adherent of DEI, as we are here at Trinity, and we love it, but if you do that, you're not going to just score well on any of those ranking metrics. You're not going to do well on a lot of the things that we are told we're supposed to value. But the irony is, if you value those things, then you get slammed for being elitist and not caring about people. It's a, you know, kind of a Hobson's choice at this point. But I want to stand up and say that most of us are doing exactly the right thing by the American people. We are welcoming at most of our institutions many first-generation students who are eager to learn and to earn their degrees to go off into well-paying jobs in industries that require them to have advanced degrees and licensure. So it's not like they don't have to participate. We just need to tell that story better, and we haven't.
Thank you for that. Michael, Gavin, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would first echo everything Pat said. I swear I was going to say something similar at the very beginning, 100%. And I actually think one of the solutions, and I've been on this bandwagon for about a year now, of a reimagination of what actual elite institutions are needs to occur with funding following it in order for our higher ed promises to be made. An institution like Pat's is serving first-gen students and having certain, I don't know what your completion rates are, but I guarantee you that more money coming into a community college like mine, I could transform lives in a higher level than ever before. And that would be a kind of different kind of imagination of what it means to be an elite institution that is not necessarily predicated on gatekeeping who comes in. And then the second part, I'll go back to one thing that Michael Roth had said earlier, in total agreement again. One nuance is our stories in higher ed, I think, need to be flipped from the way that we often work in higher ed. We are all professionally grow up in the discourse of rationality And we're not talking about rational beings. We're talking about people who are either tricked by people who are very well aware of what they're doing with these policies, who are all educated almost to a person at the very elite universities where the presidents are being brought forth to Congress. These are not people who don't know what they're doing, but what they're relying on is the lack of education of the people that they're tricking into not believing in higher ed. And untangling that is really important. I think one element of, we brought this on ourselves, we are educating some people to become very evil in the kind of draconian policies that they're enacting in certain states, and at the federal level, at these very elite institutions that are speaking for the sector. And I think that needs to be square out in front in terms of where the blame lies. I don't mean to say that those institutions have some blame, but there has to be some civic engagement and civic education that is occurring prior to those people getting a degree. When you look at, this is the last part of what I'd say, when you look at the Congress, half of those people that did not vote for for President Biden to be justified as president are still in seats of power. And they're almost all of them were educated with a bachelor's degree or higher at an elite institution, as we define it today. So that's the other, I was going to go the other way, but Pat already took that one. So I took the other pathway there.
That's a great addition, Michael. And I think one thing, Pat, you said that I think about a lot right now is when you think about elite or elitist higher education, as somebody recently corrected me, that if elite institutions are saying anything right now, what they're saying is, please don't tax our endowments. And though I understand that, and if I were a university president, it's probably not the best thing to be leading with at this moment when you have a $53 billion endowment or a $13 billion endowment here. And that's our public voice right now. And what I understand is university leaders are organizing only around that. And I think that's not going to play well. Michael, I just saw you click on. Did you want to add something, Michael Roth?
Well, I agree with you about the endowment question. I've been asked, would I be opposed to an endowment tax? And I said, if they're going to increase taxes on the wealthiest institutions, corporations, and individuals, and I think higher education should participate in that. But that's not, of course, what the discourse is about right now in the Trump administration. It seems to me that we have whatever the student groups we serve, that finding more ways to enhance democratic culture through education is a really important task in the next few years. I'm trying to avoid concentrating so much on the federal government's new policies that I just don't do my basic job, which is to help our students become not only more thoughtful individuals and better members of our campus community, but also to become more capable citizens, more capable of participating in the public sphere. And I think that there's a lot we can do as individual schools, but more importantly, as networked institutions. And Michael Gavin has done a lot of work in this, and Pat has been working in this area for a long time as well, to encourage our students to develop the skills to participate in the public sphere, even as they are learning to become nurses or go to on to graduate school in some other area, or that those are going to be part of what we do. But I think that it's something that we can do a lot more with, and we can do more both on our campus and with outreach to high schools to have a concerted effort to educate people for democratic practices. And although the forces that are in power, I think, will not find that congenial, it's hard to oppose. That is, the rhetoric of America First is not incompatible with helping our students become better citizens, better Americans, if they want to talk about it that way. And I think that at fancy places like Wesleyan, there'll be some pushback. Some students are really wanting to get the brass ring or the gold ring, whatever the ring is. But I think there's just there's a heck of a lot more we can do to, in this time of increased authoritarianism, to nurture the seeds of democracy, so that when the environment is more hospitable, those seeds can bear fruit.
That's great. Let me ask one other question. I'm going to go to the Q&A. We have a very active participants. I wonder if you could identify each of you as we look at the inauguration coming on Monday and the variety of issues that this administration says they're going to go after with higher education. What are you doing the most planning around right now? What's the one that's most concerning to you for the health of your particular institution? And you're all at very different kinds of institutions. I'm sure you are all very accomplished leaders and you're doing some planning around what if this happens. Pat, can you talk
yes,
about what?
Yes.
Yeah.
No doubt, it's the immigration issue. 15% of our undergraduate students are undocumented. We work with the Dream.us, which is one of the major national organizations supporting undoc students. They are extremely worried, although I have assured them repeatedly that it is unlikely that the administration will go after Dreamers. And in fact, President Trump has said some good things about wanting to find a way to help the Dreamers. So we try to do that, but we're very vigilant. We are working with immigration lawyers to be sure that if anything does happen, if anybody comes up and demands to see lists or whatever, that we know exactly how to respond. It's unfortunate. The students are more worried about their families, and that's where we can protect our students to some extent, but we can't protect their families. And so we're doing a lot of preparation for counseling and, the emotional support that our undoc students need, and immigrant students too. Even if they're here on visas, they're worried as well. So the climate, and also being the kind of campus we are with great diversity, the climate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, we live it every day at Trinity. I almost, it's like almost a non-issue for us because it's the total issue for us. And after the election, there were many fears that for a Black student, can I even aspire to a job anymore? For a Latina student who comes from an immigrant background, are people going to look at me like there's something wrong with me, and so forth? Where do I fit in? And it's all women at Trinity for the most part, so the issues for women as well. So all of those DEI issues thread around the immigration issues as well, and those are what we're most concerned about.
Michael, Gavin, how do you look at that issue and the immediate threats after Monday?
So I actually, I might do two here real quick. One is that one of my efforts that I'm doing right now is gathering leaders at higher ed across the country through a group called Education for All, where we've delineated 7 major issues that are going to be hit at campuses potentially Monday or quickly after. And they all boil down to 2 things, right? One is and both Pat alluded to, one is leadership in terms of the culture of the campus and how students and employees feel safe as a result of your leadership. So I've been working on not only messaging, but making sure that everyone knows at our campus that our alignment towards completion and equity is unwavering. And subsequently, we're not changing anything until it is absolutely required by law or we lose our financial aid. Those are the only ways in which we're changing. And I would just put a caveat out there. Time is the friend of all of us, so that, some of these executive orders, et cetera, going back to the elite institutions where they can help us out, is taking these to the Supreme Court and making sure that we don't put any changes in play until that is happening. The second is policy level. I'll add one group that we haven't talked about yet that is on our campus, that immediately after the election we had our it's called PRISM, but our group that is LGBTQIA was very concerned about potentially Obergefell being overturned in the near future and having a subsequent plan to that. So that's one element that you don't hear about a lot because it's a couple years out. But we at Education for All, we have a website, I'll just let you all know, where we have resources for how people can plan accordingly to their campus culture. It's educationforall.hub.com, and all free, not trying to sell anybody anything. And we have no money coming in. Just, you're welcome to our thinking, and always welcome
Good group.
other thoughts.
Good group.
Yeah, doing great work. And Michael, you raise an issue before I turn to Michael Roth. The historian Tim Snyder talks about the risk of anticipatory obedience.
Yep.
And you are being very clear that you are avoiding that at all costs. You will
Exactly.
do what you need to do when you have to do it.
Right.
I am seeing lots of anticipatory obedience taking place in our sector right now. Michael
Yes.
Roth?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's the fear factor is enormous, and perhaps unsurprisingly, though I still find it morally reprehensible, the richest institutions are the most fearful, and are most eager to comply, and those institutions that really operate close to the edge financially. Some of them are really standing up for the mission that we all claim to have, actually, about access, completion, equity, and in our case, it's immigration again, like as Pat said, that we are trying to help our students who are undocumented make sure that they have the resources they need, and all on our staff and faculty who have families who may have undocumented members, and giving them some tools and some support in the face of the ongoing threats. I think around academic freedom, it should be really clear to our faculty that I call for more intellectual diversity and more conservatives on the faculty, but I will fight as hard as I can to protect the ability of professors to make decisions about what they teach and how they teach it. And we may disagree about it, as colleagues or as fellow teachers, but in the end, I think that the pressure on academic freedom will be great. In the name, in the name of free speech, there'll be lots of efforts to squash oppositional speech, and they're already happening, and we have to stand firm against those.
Yeah, and you all have written, I think, very persuasively about the argument that somehow university leaders taking a position on these issues somehow interferes with academic freedom. And Michael, you said, when was it that a university president said something and everybody felt like they couldn't agree, that they had to
Yes.
go along with the university president? If only.
There's no evidence. I mean, it's an empirical question, right? If speaking out with chilled speech, that you could, I'd love to see some evidence. There's no evidence. There's a feeling that they would like people who speak oppositionally or who speak in a way that will divide the constituencies, if they'll shut up. And it's interesting to me because I've been criticized for being a safe space guy rather than a free speech absolutist. But all these folks who 2.5 years ago were talking about we need more speech, that's the cure for bad speech, is more speech. Now they say we need more silence. Because donor X doesn't like it, or student group Y doesn't like it, or the government doesn't like it. And I think that I gave the talk just a day or two ago, and Stanley Fish was in the audience. He told me afterwards, and I said, we need leaders, not bureaucrats. And he said, you're a bureaucrat. That's all you are. You should be happy being a bureaucrat. And I think that's fun. And Stanley Fish is always amusing. But I think we're just paid too much to be bureaucrats. And we're supposed to be educators. And the way you're an educator is to participate in a conversation, and we might learn we're wrong. It happens to me quite often, and that's how you learn, by participating in a conversation. That's how you build democracy, by participating in the public sphere. And I think we have to really work hard at that.
Yeah, thank you for that. A couple of questions. We're not going to get to all of them, but one theme that's emerged in the questions is, how do we explain the reticence of university leaders at this moment, the fact that you three are unique? And one colleague asks, do we look at boards of trustees as explanation? Is the pressure coming from boards on university leaders to, at this moment, keep their heads down? I'll throw that out to anybody who wants to address that.
I could take a crack at that. I
Please,
mean,
Michael, yeah.
I actually have two board members I saw here. And I say that as a compliment to them, that they see the value in community college access, but also the defense of the higher concept of education, and subsequently me doing that work. I do think, because of the work that I've been engaged in with Education for All, I've run into many different kinds of presidents, and sitting in different kind of contexts and different seats. And I think it's a little more nuanced than this person has a good board or something to that effect, because there's also in certain states the threat of who's going to replace me once I get removed. And there is that very real concern among some presidents in some states that I think it's important for internal cultures to know that as well. But how is the president even going to communicate that to the internal culture in a safe way? So it's a very precarious position for some presidents in certain contexts. And I do think, back to what Michael was saying earlier, there are a lot of these debates, though, I think are what we're paid to be in, right? That we're supposed to be out there as leaders in higher ed, defending both our institutions and our sectors, and thinking through the last part. I think we were talking about this before the session, but the how presidents and leaders in higher ed can collaborate and form coalitions about who says what to whom and for what purpose has not yet been figured out. And I think that could be a very powerful exercise with regard to defending the sector, recognizing that some people are in more precarious situations than others. And that's my 2 cents on all of that.
Yeah.
Pat and Michael,
And-
do you want to add anything to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I'll jump in here just to say, let's not discount the corrupting power of money in all of this. The corrupting power of money is why Zuckerberg and all the tech bros are bowing down at Mar-a-Lago right now. And it's the same phenomenon that's happening certainly at the larger universities with these multi-billion dollar philanthropists who are underwriting some of the campaigns against presidents who have spoken out. I mean, Claudine Gay didn't lose her job just because she had a foolish presentation. She had some pretty powerful people who were donors to the university who threatened to pull out. Same with Liz McGill at Penn and others. The money piece, it may be on boards or not, because a lot of the largest donors are not on boards. But of course, trustees get nervous if they hear a big donor is pulling money. Michael Roth made the comment that, those of us who speak out, probably the louder we speak, the less money we have. So there is a correlation between the wealth of institutions and the fear factor. And that plays through both in support for the institution and, dare I say, and I make myself very unpopular among presidents when I say it, the other problem is presidents are paid too damn much sometimes, excuse my French. But if you have a 7-figure salary and a golden parachute and the house, the car, and all of that, it may be harder for you to take a principled stance where you could lose your job if you fought with your board or fought with a donor. And that's sad. That's part of the corrupting influence of money. So I think we cannot discount that particular piece.
I have to say, of course, public institutions, like Michael was alluding to too, that's a different ballgame.
Right.
You have state legislators, and in 2016 we declared ourselves a sanctuary campus within days of the election, and my board is full of Wesleyan alumni, and they said we were too legalistic and we should be bolder and we should be more aggressive, and I thought, well, I'm counting my lucky stars, that was then. It's a little different atmosphere now. But I think one of the jobs of a president is to actually lead the board, not just lead the institution, and not just be responsive to individual board members' concerns. That happens, of course, and as Pat said, the money can be corrupting. But I think there's no excuse for not finding a way to defend your mission publicly. People don't have to take on Secretary of Education or the president. And there are good arguments, I think, or reasonable arguments why that's not always the right thing for a president to do. But to find interesting ways, powerful ways in the public sphere to defend what we do as educators, seems to me that's really high on the list of what university presidents do.
We talked a little bit as we were meeting before the webinar about the role and the position of the large number of acronyms of academic university college associations and their role in this. They represent, you all are members of probably a couple of those. How do you see their role at this particular historical moment, both in terms of descriptively what they're doing and normatively what they ought to be doing? Pat, you want to start that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're membership organizations that have to live by the will of their members, and that makes it hard for the much larger associations like the American Council on Education that represents everybody. It makes them very hard. Now, I think Ted Mitchell has certainly tried to take some principled stances. He's worked with Penn America, and he used to be post-secondary assistant secretary, so he knows the ropes. And ACE does a lot of really good work on the inside, of course, with the lobbying and the governmental influence. But there are days when I still wish that ACE would come out with a stronger, bolder statement about the defense of American higher education, and that may be just me. I think some of the smaller organizations are actually a little better at this because it's a more unified group of institutions. I do wish they would be a little louder, but our organization that works with the private colleges called NICU, the Independent College Lobby, they're very good on the regulatory issues. Now, once again, they're not going to take on the great big philosophical issues about higher ed, but they will take on some of the regulatory issues. So, it depends on the issue. What I don't see is the higher ed, what they used to call the secretariat, I don't know if they still call it, the heads of all those organizations coming together as a force to be strong on behalf of our industry. And I wish they would come together as a force. There is strength in numbers. And if all of the heads of the higher ed associations, and by the way, the accreditors as well, because the accreditors are also in danger of losing their jobs in this administration. So they should join with the higher ed associations in Washington and develop a much stronger voice. This is what I mean about the counterweight to government that higher ed could be, and give some cover also, by the way, for presidents, because if presidents can find some cover with statements from the major associations, it's more likely that we will be affirmed rather than appearing to be out on a limb by ourselves.
That's a great point. Would either Michael like to add something to that regarding the associations and their role?
I could just add, I mean, I actually think Pat's right on. I think the conglomeration of the leaders of the heads, and they do talk, but I think it to the point of getting together about this particular issue is important. And just add this last point, I think one of the things that we're facing as a sector is we have some pretty heavyweight thinkers on the anti-DEI, anti-academic freedom, anti-institutional autonomy group that are very well funded, and that's their only focus. The associations have equity, they have academic freedom, et cetera, as part of their focus. And so recognizing that tidal wave coming at us as lacking a front sandbag, if you will, is I think primarily important. And I think it does take something like what Pat said in order to make it happen.
Thank you. Michael Roth, anything to add?
No, I think that's been said. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point, Michael. What as we move toward the end of our time together, one of the accusations for university leaders who are speaking out is that you are violating the norm or the law of nonpartisanship as a nonprofit organization. What do you do as leaders to respond to that when one political party appears to have become anti-liberal democracy? How do you navigate that particular, because that's a hard one. And how do you respond to that? Because that argument is out there a lot.
Mhm. If I could jump in here, Eric, because I saw in the question boxes an issue that relates directly to this. Somebody wrote, they looked at the logo that I have up here right behind me, Education for Justice, and said that justice is a political word. So doesn't that mean that Trinity is somehow politicizing education, that we use the word justice? And that illustrates the problem that people manipulate language all the time, and they ascribe the wrong meaning to language that becomes political, and it's not. So we're a Catholic institution. Social justice is central to everything that we do. It is a central teaching of the Catholic Church. And what we do in the education of mostly low-income women of color is profoundly justice work. Justice in faith traditions is what we owe to each other for the lives that we have, the life that God gives us. I'm not going to go into a religious thing today, but the idea that somebody would pick on the word justice and say, well, see, there you go, you're being, a liberal politician, and we're not. We're living a moral center. And I think that's true for most of the issues that I pick on, and I think that others pick on. I say they're not political issues from where I sit. They are moral value issues. Defending our use of diversity, equity, and inclusion principles in our work, that's not a political issue for me. That's a moral issue. How we treat other human beings who are of different races, different backgrounds, how we teach our students to be leaders in a society that is so diverse. I spoke the other day at the naturalization ceremony at U.S. District Court here in D.C. for 150 new citizens. The room was the world. It was absolutely one of the most diverse audiences I ever saw. Now they're all Americans. And that's, forgive me, that's DEI. And it is justice that they were all able to take the oath of citizenship. And the world that they are entering here in America is not a world of white Christians, white nationalism. It is a world that is completely diverse, and we need our leaders to be able to see and understand that. To me, that's a moral value. That's not a political issue.
Thank you. Michaels, is partisanship charged? How do you respond to it?
Well, I think in many ways, the highly selective colleges and universities have gleefully promoted a kind of partisanship, especially in the humanities and interpretive social sciences, as in a way of defending a particular political notion of, let's say, social justice or of critique more broadly. And I think the failure of many colleges and universities, especially the ones in my sector, the more selective ones, failure of our schools to actually entertain seriously conservative points of view or alternative perspectives on questions in politics and society has led to, I think, a reasonable criticism of what we do as being inherently partisan, and that when we promote democracy, what we're really promoting is we want certain people to come out on top with the issues that we care most about. And I think that we are vulnerable in that regard, because I think we are, and again, I say that the part of the higher education that I know best, the highly selective schools, we hire in ways that imitate the political and sometimes moral values of the professors who are employed here now. It's happened when I was a student in the 70s. We asked what we thought of as the old farts, why do you not hire women? They, oh, we'd love to hire women, but we hire the best. And when I talk to my colleagues sometimes about why don't we hire more conservatives, they say, we'd love to hire conservatives, but we hire the best. And they don't see the irony. Mm-hmm. And when I just say what I just said to you, I say to them, and they're like, so, yeah, well, we're not like they were. We are hiring the best. And I think that kind of dismissal of certain points of view as being, and sometimes the religious points of view, sometimes they're conservative, that has come back to haunt us. And someone will immediately say, yes, but those people are denying my very humanity. Do you want to have Nazis in the? No, but that would be like saying we have to hire Stalinists or something. I mean, we don't have to immediately do the slippery slope thing. So I do think that college presidents standing up for their mission, which is to encourage our students to participate in education so as to better themselves and their communities, and find ways to do that while participating in the public sphere as part of an educational experience, that seems to me it doesn't have to be partisan. Partisan issues will arise, but you can treat them educationally, like as issues from which to learn, rather than issues that you have to decide upon.
Michael, Gavin, I'm going to give you the last word in the 2 minutes that we have left.
Well, I would agree with both what Michael and Pat said. I would also throw out there that, you know, the construct or the imagined construct that higher ed is somehow liberal has been altogether dismissed by good research, which suggests that when students are feeling like there's some sort of conservative or liberal bias, it's between the students themselves. It's not the faculty on the campus. The faculty are professional. At the same time, I do think it's important for us to underscore as Michael said, we could as professionals in academia nurture that kind of conversation between those two viewpoints we could always continuously improve, which leads me to my last point is I see nothing political about defending mission, as Michael said, defending human beings and their stories as important to the academic enterprise. I think that's right in our wheelhouse, and the notion that somehow that's outside of our domain because it's either political or outside of institutional neutrality is a false argument. And I would also just say that there's never been anything. We've never had institutional neutrality. I don't even know what that would really mean. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you very much. For all of you who we have 38 questions in the question. We couldn't get to all of them. So grateful first to Michael, and Pat. Your voices are clear, smart, and more important than ever. And I hope that you continue to write and speak and sometimes scream as we enter this new phase of American politics. Thank you all for your voices. Thank you all for joining this. My email address is eric.mlyn@duke.edu. If participants have ideas for this project or things they want to follow up on, I welcome hearing from you. But for now, thanks all for doing this.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you. Great to be with
Be
you.
well,
Thank you.
everybody.